Well, like I said, good evening, possibly good afternoon to some of you, depending upon where you're joining us from. I would like to welcome you all to the University of Michigan, perhaps once again, as I know some of you may have engaged in a few webinars from our program staff last week. But again, welcome to Michigan. And our hope for this webinar this evening is to provide some financial aid information for you as incoming students to help you understand a little bit about how financial aid works, making sure that you've got all of your bases covered as it relates to making sure that your aid is posted appropriately to your account, and just understanding again the flow of how financial aid works and is processed through the university. So my name is Cerise Carrington, and I am the Assistant Director of Financial Aid here in the MSW program. And I have joining me Marissa Tucker. She's our financial aid officer. I'll allow her to again introduce herself in just a moment. She is going to be co-facilitating this webinar with me this evening. I want to give a few housekeeping points. We are welcome to taking questions throughout the webinar. Even though we have a set presentation to offer to you all, please feel free at any time to ask questions. Between the two of us, we're able to answer questions. Maybe it might be that we're sharing, hey, we're going to get to that in a few slides. So if you would just bear with us, but otherwise we're happy to take your questions. And normally this webinar does end earlier than the allotted time frame. And so Marissa and I try to hang on towards the end to answer any questions that you all might have that may not be best suited for the entirety of the webinar, especially since we're recording today. I do also want to acknowledge, I understand that these are trying times, given recent executive orders across the federal government. And so a lot of students we've been connecting with over the last few weeks, there's a lot of apprehension as it relates to federal awarding, federal loans, student loan repayment and forgiveness options. And I just want to share with students, unfortunately, we don't have very much more information to share outside of really what you've heard on the news. As we are informed as of this evening's webinar, there will be no changes to any financial aid that students have been offered at this point in time, whether it be through the School of Social Work or at the federal level with your loans and work study. So I just wanted to give that caveat, as I'm sure that some of you might have questions and concerns regarding that. So again, we're happy to take any questions or comments that you might have. Just unfortunately, not a lot of information that we're able to provide with what the university is aware of at this time. So with that being said, I will go ahead and just give you some objectives for tonight's session. Hopefully you'll have a better understanding of grants and scholarships versus federal funding. You'll understand some of the responsibilities of the School of Social Work versus the university's Office of Financial Aid, gaining an understanding of tuition and fee rates and how those are assessed, understanding a student's total cost of attendance, understanding your student bill and how financial aid is processed, and then finally identifying some additional sources of financial aid as you maneuver through the program. And so with that being said, I will turn things over to Marissa.
Thanks, Cerise. As Cerise mentioned, my name is Marissa. I'm a financial aid officer here in the School of Social Work. So happy to be meeting with you all this evening. Hopefully we can answer some of your financial aid questions. So students here in our program, they tend to work with two different offices when it comes to financial aid. They work with our office here in the School of Social Work, and then they also work with the Office of Financial Aid here through the University of Michigan. The Office of Financial Aid, they tend to process students' federal financial aid. So for those of you who are able to submit a FAFSA application, that would be processed through the Office of Financial Aid. And then our office here through the School of Social Work, we review students for any merit or need-based grants and scholarships. So as far as the scholarships and grants are concerned, many may most likely, hopefully by this time, have been awarded scholarships and grants through the School of Social Work. And they may be some of these ones listed here, such as the Michigan Scholarship, the Opportunity Grant, the Dean's Mission Scholarship, the MSW Tuition Award, possibly various other development and or donor fund awards, many of which are awarded at the time of admissions. Some of you may even be awarded some special programs as well. So a couple notes regarding these scholarships. Both the Michigan Scholarship and the Opportunity Grants are need-based grants and scholarships that do require that free application for federal student aid or the FAFSA. Scholarships like the Dean Mission Scholarship has both a merit and a need-based component. The MSW Tuition Award is for our part-time students, and it helps offset the cost of tuition, as part-time students do pay per credit hour, and full-time students pay a flat rate if they enroll in 9 or more credits. For the development or donor funds, these applications will open up in the fall semester. We usually send an email out to all students registered for fall semester. So stay tuned and check your email for that, as more information will be coming. As I mentioned, students also who submit a FAFSA are eligible for federal funding. So when it comes to federal funding, our graduate students tend to be eligible for that direct unsubsidized loan. They may be eligible for a direct Graduate Plus loan, and students may be eligible for work study. But again, FAFSA is required in order for it to be awarded. It is important to note that you are filling out the correct FAFSA form. So the 2024-2025 FAFSA applies to fall 24, winter 25, and this spring summer 25. The 2025-2026 FAFSA application, which is now open, students can submit, does apply to the fall 2025, winter 2026, and next spring summer 2026 semesters. So this most likely will need to be completed for future semesters if you're interested in federal financial aid. I do want to just note most students are using a combination of grants, scholarships, and loans to cover their cost of attendance, and that the School of Social Work is generally not able to award full tuition or full cost of attendance. So as I mentioned, this just kind of goes over what our two different offices do for our students during their time here in the program. Again, the School of Social Work is responsible for awarding scholarships and grants. Again, many of these are notified at the time of admissions for students. Because of this, students do not need to reapply for grants or scholarships each semester or academic year. We do try to simplify things for our students so they know that exactly what their grant and scholarship package looks like. So that way you can evaluate your needs for any potential federal funding. As I mentioned, the University Office of Financial Aid handles all of the federal awarding, which does include federal loans and work study. Again, students will be notified of awards each academic year, which includes for them fall and winter semesters. Students will be notified of spring, summer awards usually right around this time. So students who register for spring, summer courses, shortly after that is when they're able to view their federal financial aid and their School of Social Work grants or scholarships in Wolverine Access. Most students do receive the exact same financial aid package each semester as long as they do submit that FAFSA for each academic year. So for students in the spring, summer semester, such as yourselves, you can expect to receive those same awards and direct unsubsidized loan as well as work study for each semester you do enroll. The University Office of Financial Aid also processes the FAFSA application as well as budget increases, which I'll go over in some more detail in a few slides. It is just important to note which office to contact regarding your questions. The university's Office of Financial Aid is most likely not going to know the specifics of some of our School of Social Work grants and scholarships, while the School of Social Work may not be able to answer some specific questions regarding the processing of the FAFSA and things like that. One thing I do want to just point out is that graduate students are not eligible for the Pell Grants, and they're usually not eligible for scholarships across other departments on campus. So taking a look more here, just at federal funding, our graduate students are eligible for 3 sources of federal funding. They do, as I mentioned before, tend to be automatically eligible for that direct unsubsidized loan just by submitting the FAFSA application. This loan is not need-based. Students are eligible for $20,500 per academic year. This does break down to about $10,250 per semester. There is an origination fee or loan fee that is associated with that. So the loan will not pay out for $10,250 onto your direct account, but instead just slightly under that. Students enrolled in the spring-summer semester are eligible for the unsubsidized loan, but again, as I've mentioned, it comes after you've registered for those spring-summer courses. The interest rate is currently 8.08%, and that is fixed over the lifetime of the loan. The student is responsible for the interest that does accrue from the time that the funds are dispersed. Interest rates may increase for loans in future academic years. As I mentioned, this loan does have an origination fee, and it's currently 1.057%. And this essentially just comes out of the loan, which means only about $10,142 is what will pay out onto the student's accounts. The federal governments set the rates and fees each year, and again, are subject to change. The student is also responsible for all of the interest that accrues on this unsubsidized loan from the moment that it is dispersed to you. Students may also be eligible for that Direct Graduate Plus loan. However, with the Direct Graduate Plus loan, a separate application is required and can be submitted through studentaid.gov, the same website you go to submit your FAFSA application. This loan requires students to complete a FAFSA application and is used for students who may need additional funding to cover tuition and cost of living. The maximum a student can borrow is the cost of attendance determined by the university minus any other financial aid received, which includes scholarships, grants, loans, work study. I'll go over some examples and talk about the cost of attendance in a few slides here. As mentioned before, students enrolled in spring-summer semester are eligible for that Graduate Plus loan. However, it is important to note that a new application is required for the spring-summer semester, something that you can complete now. The interest rate is currently 9.08% and is fixed over the lifetime of the loan. The student, again, is responsible for the interest that does accrue from the time the funds are dispersed. Again, the interest rate may increase for loans in future academic years. The current origination fee is currently 4.228%, so slightly more there than the unsubsidized loan. Again, the Graduate Plus loan application is required for this loan. You will need to submit one for fall and winter semesters, and again, a separate one for spring-summer semester. Just a quick note to discuss federal loans versus private loans. It's important to make sure you do your research, explore all of your options, and ultimately only borrow what you need. Federal loans qualify for federal loan forgiveness programs. Private loans do not. So again, just something to think about kind of long term. Finally, work study is the only need-based federal financial aid that graduate students may be eligible for. Work study allows students to earn a paycheck, usually biweekly, for educational expenses and other costs such as rent, food, gas. It's important to note that this award is not applied to a student's account, but instead is earned by working throughout the semester. It is not a loan, and you must use it, otherwise you will lose it. The maximum award can range from $3,000 to $6,000 per academic year, or $1,500 to $3,000 a semester. For example, to receive your maximum allowance, a student could work for $15 an hour for 200 hours a semester. Many students work between 10 to 20 hours per week and may not even reach that maximum award. Work study may be limited in that spring-summer semester, as many programs and units across campus are not open or just not as active during the summer months. Students can look and apply for jobs through the Student Employment Office. These jobs may be working in the library, dining hall, School of Social Work, even our office. There are options for students to search for remote positions. We ultimately recommend to our students, especially our full-time students who are in our program, not to work full-time as well. For students in our part-time program, it is difficult to work full-time unless their job is entirely flexible. Ultimately, for all students, it is difficult to work full-time and engage in our program. Before I get into these slides, I do want to give a quick disclaimer, as we probably do have mixture of people in our meeting here today. So whether you're a full-time or a part-time student, some of these things we review may or may not relate to you, but a lot of the information is kind of the same across the board. So in this example here, we're looking at the costs per semester for a full-time student who is in the online program, and they are enrolled in 9 or more credits. For these students, they are charged a flat rate. Whether they enroll in 9 or 16 credits, the cost of tuition is the same. I do want to mention that tuition rates will increase for the 2026 academic year. So this would include fall 25, winter 26, and spring summer 2026 semesters. These rates are usually determined prior to the academic year starting, usually happens in July. On this slide here, we're looking at the cost per semester for a part-time online student who is enrolled in 8 or less credit hours. Part-time status is considered 8 or less credit hours. For part-time students, the university charges per credit hour as opposed to a flat tuition rate. Part-time students can register for different credits each semester, so we did not provide a specific breakdown here, but students can visit the university registrar's website for the breakdown. I believe the link is listed kind of at the top of the screen here. Part-time students are charged one rate for the first credit they enroll, and then a different rate for each additional credit hour that they enroll in. So now looking kind of at the cost of attendance or the student budget, we do kind of use those words interchangeably here in our office, but essentially they mean the same thing when we talk about them. So the university has to determine the estimated cost for an individual enrolled in our program, which is set by the university and not by the School of Social Work. These costs include things like tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, transportation, personal and other miscellaneous costs. It's important to note that the figures below represent estimated expenses for one semester of full-time on-campus enrollment. What this means is that the university estimates $9,913 for room and board in the city of Ann Arbor, which means essentially it should not cost a student more than that to live each semester. For students, room and board cost is different, and the amounts will vary, but the university just has to give an estimate of how much it may cost. The cost of attendance does vary for part-time and full-time students, so do feel free to reach out to us with any specific questions. Ultimately, the only difference would be the tuition, which is specific for each program. As I mentioned before, the Office of Financial Aid are the ones that process budget increases. So budget increases can be done for students whose cost may exceed the total budget listed here. Again, the students can pursue this option through the Office of Financial Aid. It may require specific documents or proof that your budget does exceed the cost of attendance set by the university. Both part-time and full-time students can apply for this. So next we'll go over some examples of calculating your financial aid to cover your costs. In this first example here, we're looking at one semester for a non-resident student in our MSW program. In this scenario, we want to determine how much money the student could take out in a potential Graduate Plus loan. So in order to do this, we take the total student budget or cost of attendance, which you can see listed there. And then we subtract the financial aid. So that includes in this scenario, grants, scholarships, work study, and the direct unsubsidized loan. This leaves the student with a remaining budget of approximately $25,541, which means the student can take out approximately that much in a potential Graduate Plus loan. Now, a few things to note about this scenario. We are assuming that the student aid index is 0. And additionally, tuition and fees for the semester will be $27,108. So part of that Graduate Plus loans will go towards that tuition and fee balance, and the remaining part may be refunded to the student to cover any living expenses. In our second example here, again, we're looking at one semester for a non-resident MSW student to see what their potential refund may be. So in this scenario, we take their total financial aid costs, which again include grants, scholarships, work study, and that direct unsubsidized loan. And we subtract work study in this scenario. We don't want to count work study as it is applied to as it's not applied to the actual student account bill, as students again must find that work study job and begin working to receive those funds. So again, you don't want to count it, as there's kind of a lot of what ifs in order to secure that funding. This gives the student approximately $28,500 to be applied directly to their student bill. Again, it's important to note just that you're subtracting any loan fees that may be associated with your financial aid. The non-resident tuition and fees for one semester totals $27,108. So in this scenario, the student's financial aid is greater than the tuition cost, and so the student will receive a small refund, which you can see listed there. So in my kind of last example here, this example demonstrates a student who may have a balance after their financial aid has been applied to their accounts. For this specific scenario, the student is a resident of Michigan in our MSW program. So again, first thing we'll want to do is add up all of their financial aid and subtract their work study award to find out the total amount of financial aid that they will actually be receiving. So $9,750 will be applied directly to the student's bill. Then we will want to subtract the tuition and fee amounts. So $16,902 for a Michigan resident leaves the student still with a balance of about $7,152. Many students in this scenario will let us know, or they'll come to us and say that they have a balance, and we'll inquire about how they may cover these costs. So if students are able to, they can pay out of pocket. Many students pursue the Graduate Plus loan, and students may also be able to sign up for payment plans and things like that. Again, you can borrow more than just your balance with that Grad Plus loan, but if you don't need additional funding to cover your living costs, you can just cover tuition and fees. Again, if you need more to cover things like living expenses, transportation, food, housing, that's what it's there for. So I do hope some of these examples have given you an idea of how you can calculate your balance after your financial aid is paid out. I will now turn it over to Cerise, who will give you more information about next steps, student bill, identifying sources of financial aid. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Before jumping into next steps, I just want to shed some more light on the employment situation within our program. And so as Marissa touched upon, our office generally does not encourage or recommend students to engage in our full-time program and also work full-time. I think that our experience has been that many part-time students in fact are able to engage in full-time employment just because of the way that the program is structured from the standpoint of classes being offered at least in the evening. But I just want to give the caveat that with both the part-time and the full-time program, the field placement is going to be a large component of your time in the program. And so whether you're part-time and you're not starting field until your second year, or if you're coming into the program starting field right away, the expectation that our field office provides to students is that you need to have some availability during the day, during the week to engage in field placement. And so regardless if you're in a field placement here in the state of Michigan or in another state, most agencies will want for you to be available during the day, during the week, when their normal business hours are occurring. And so that's what oftentimes makes it challenging for students to work full time and also engage in the program. So unless your employer is fairly flexible with allowing you time to engage in a field placement, we find that a lot of students find that as a barrier and a challenge to kind of maintain all of those aspects. I guess I should also say, and again, this is not obviously the field placement webinar, but you are able to explore employment-based field opportunities. If you are working currently in a human service or social work related agency, there are a couple of, kind of caveats and requirements for allowing your place of employment to also be your field site. But again, if you have any questions as it relates to that, I encourage you to reach out to our Office of Field Education as early as possible in starting the program. All right, so now next steps. One of the very first things that I always encourage students to take a look at is verification of their residency status. Many of you may have identified through your application that you are a Michigan resident. However, there may have been something in your application that warranted you to be considered a non-resident. There are a variety of reasons as to why students might be considered a non-resident. But if that is the case, students will have to submit an in-state tuition application in order to be considered a Michigan resident. As Marissa stated previously, tuition rates, there are in-state tuition rates and there are out-of-state tuition rates. And so if you believe that you are an in-state resident, but the university believes that you are a non-resident, you are going to be charged non-resident tuition and fees. And so it's important to make sure that this is taken care of as soon as possible. I will share with you maybe a little bit late to the curve if any of you are in the webinar as of right now, mainly because the residency office, so again, the office that handles residency matters, their office can take anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks to process those applications. And because obviously the program will start in less than 10 to 12 weeks, some of you may go into the semester starting off as a non-resident while you're working to receive final confirmation from their office. So if this applies to any of you that are in the webinar this evening, I encourage you to reach out to one of us just to have a discussion as to what you can do in the meantime of waiting for such a decision. But again, if you're not sure if this particular scenario applies to you, you can always go back and check your offer of admissions from the School of Social Work. You also are able to check within your Wolverine Access account as it should identify whether you're considered a Michigan resident or a non-resident. We encourage students to accept and or decline any loans and or work study awards in Wolverine Access. And so I've provided a screenshot here of what the page actually looks like for accepting and or declining loans and work study. I want to give a note that the university's Office of Financial Aid automatically assumes that students will be accepting federal aid that has been awarded to them. But again, that doesn't mean that you're bound to having student loans or work study. There's another step that you need to go through after you perhaps see this screen in Wolverine Access. But they automatically assume that students are accepting federal awards. And so you want to make sure that if you do not plan on accepting work study or loans, or if you want to reduce the amount of loans or work study that you're going to be awarded, you can always go into Wolverine Access and decline those awards. Now, I will also give the other note that unfortunately some students are unable to, and I think there's a time frame with the university's Office of Financial Aid as to the time frame in which you can go in and accept or decline awards. And so if you were to go into your Wolverine Access system today, you may see the decline option grayed out. Don't worry about that. Just know in that case, you will likely need to email the university's Office of Financial Aid to accept or decline a particular portion of your loan. So all is not lost if you don't have the ability to accept or decline. in Wolverine Access. And if you need to make adjustments to your amounts, you can always email the university's Office of Financial Aid. When you email them, I do encourage students to provide all of the information to help them quickly identify your student account. So making sure that you're providing your name, your student ID number, and the specifics of your request. And so when I say specifics, I mean, mention the specific semesters that you're emailing about, mention the exact amount that you're wanting to accept or decline, specifically mention the type of awards that you're wanting to accept or decline. Remember, in most cases, you are accepting aid for 2 semesters, and this is more applicable to when we get into the fall and winter semesters. As Marissa kind of mentioned, spring summer semester is kind of on an island in and of itself. So when you're packaged for spring summer, it will only be for spring summer. Same scenario, if you're applying for a Graduate Plus loan, you're only applying for a Graduate Plus loan in spring summer. Fall and winter Grad Plus loans are handled completely separately through a separate application. And again, as I mentioned, if you're unable to accept or decline in Wolverine Access, please make sure that you're sending that email to the university's Office of Financial Aid. Accepting and/or declining School of Social Work grants and scholarships are unfortunately not handled within Wolverine Access. When you were emailed your grant and scholarship award notice from the School of Social Work, there was a second attachment in that email, an accept decline form. And so in order to accept and/or decline any School of Social Work funding, you want to make sure that you complete that form and return it back to our office. And I've listed the email address here on the screen. As previously mentioned, there's another step. So once you've accepted any amount of the loans, so whether it be the direct unsubsidized loan or the Grad Plus loan, students may be required to complete a master promissory note or entrance counseling. Both are federal documents that allows the university to proceed with processing the loans to your student account. Generally speaking, I encourage students to go in and complete these documents if you are accepting loans. Otherwise, you are able to view whether or not these documents are needed in your Wolverine Access portal, and I've provided kind of the route to take there. So if you're looking at your student center, you'll want to click on financial aid. We're looking at currently aid year 2025 for the spring summer semester. And then under documents/review is where you can find a list of required items such as the entrance counseling or the promissory note. So again, if you do not complete these required documents, federal loans cannot be posted to your account. So it's going to show that you might have a much bigger balance, than you were anticipating because those loans were not able to be processed directly to your student account. We encourage students to set up direct deposit via Wolverine Access, and this is for easy access to any refunds and/or work study funding that may be due to you. If you do not have direct deposit set up or you choose not to, a check will be mailed to your current address listed in Wolverine Access. Direct deposit essentially just allows you to receive any applicable funds much quicker because otherwise, not only does the university have to process a check for you, they have to put it through the mail, you have to receive it. And then even though I know these days, it's just a snapshot, with your cell phone to deposit checks, you still have to physically, deposit that check into your bank account. So there are just a few more steps when it comes to check processing versus direct deposit. So we do strongly encourage students to set up direct deposit for those purposes. Now talking about understanding your student bill. And so most of you will have a student invoice in your Wolverine Access account within a week or so after registering for spring summer courses. It's my understanding that most of you, if I'm not mistaken, are scheduled to register on April the 11th. And so shortly after registering for those classes, you should see an invoice in your account that will identify applicable tuition and fees for the courses that you've registered for. Some of you may be residing in university housing. And then in that invoice, you may also see a separate section, which is titled pending aid. The invoice will not always show you the financial aid that will be processed to your account. Specifically for federal funding, there is a timeline in which the university can post federal aid to your account. So unfortunately, if you're enrolling or registering for classes on April the 11th, you might see an invoice, I don't know, maybe April the 18th, let's just say. But again, that's still a little sooner than the university is allowed to officially post financial aid to your account. So you'll see a section that's titled pending aid, which should include any direct unsubsidized loans, as well as grants or scholarships that you have been awarded. It's important to note that Graduate Plus loans will not show up as pending aid. So if you are borrowing a Graduate Plus loan, the Plus loans are just automatically posted to your account at the applicable time. And then aid will automatically be applied to your student bill on or around April the 25th. So again, around this time, I always encourage students to go into their Wolverine Access account and actually look at their student account to make sure that all of the grants and scholarships that you've been awarded, all of the loans that you requested to borrow have officially been posted to your account. Tuition is typically, at least for spring, summer semester, tuition is usually going to be due before the semester actually begins. And so you want to make sure that your financial aid is covering all of your costs. Otherwise, you're going to be required to make an out-of-pocket payment if that was your plan originally. So any excess amount will be refunded to a student. So again, mailed to your residence or direct deposited on or after May the 2nd. A lot of this just depends upon timing. So for those of you that may not have submitted your accept form for the grants and scholarships, that could impact this timeline. If you have not completed your entrance counseling or that promissory note, that could impact any refunds that are due to you. But again, the university consistently on a weekly basis, once the semester gets started, they process any applicable refunds. So again, if you don't receive anything on May 2nd, don't worry. You'll receive it in a few weeks once you've taken care of getting in all of those other documents. Tuition and fees for spring summer will be due by April the 30th. So again, as I mentioned, tuition and fees specifically for spring summer are going to be due before the semester actually begins. Payment should be made to the university by this date only if your total awards or your total financial aid is not enough to cover the entire student bill. So again, I know that some of you are planning to make out-of-pocket payments to cover tuition costs, which is entirely okay, but just know that April 30th is the deadline to do so. As I mentioned, for those of you that may be a little behind the curve in getting some of these documents submitted, this may mean that all of your intended financial aid may not have been applied to your student account by April the 30th. And again, that's okay. The university tends to give a small grace period for students to make a payment if they get past that tuition and fee deadline. But again, that's why it's important to go in and check your account balance once that invoice is generated to make sure that any aid that you have been awarded is going to post to your account as appropriate. Registration adjustments are made after you have been issued a refund. So I want to just pause there and talk for a moment. Once you register for classes, you're going to have generated in your Wolverine Access account an official award notice from the university's Office of Financial Aid. For those of you that are part-time students, you will quickly see some errors, if you will, in that official award notice. The university's Office of Financial Aid automatically assumes that students will be registered full-time. So regardless of the fact that you may have applied to the part-time program, you've been accepted to the part-time program, and everything in our system shows that you are a part-time student. For purposes of financial aid packaging and awarding, the university's Office of Financial Aid just again automatically assumes that everyone is a full-time student when they start the program, and at the start of each semester, in fact. It's not until the third week into the semester, which is what we refer to as the third week drop add deadline. So that's essentially just the deadline for students to be able to drop courses and or add courses without any financial penalties or anything like that. So it's after that third week drop add count, the university's Office of Financial Aid will go in and take a look at everyone's registration. And it's only then that they will see that you have registered as a part-time student. So as Marissa mentioned, that's 8 credits and below. But again, the award notice that you receive will likely say full-time. And so the amounts that are listed there are going to be based upon full-time enrollment. Did I just lose my screen here?
Your home's, I can still see, but your home screen popped up, so you might want to minimize that.
Okay.
There you go.
It's showing now?
It is showing now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Something just went wonky on my screen. I didn't even touch anything. But yes, so I'm not going to tell you to disregard that official award notice that you receive from the university's Office of Financial Aid, particularly if you are a part-time student, but just know that your total costs are going to be off a little bit just because you have to factor in your part-time tuition rates versus full-time tuition rates. And I know that this may sound a bit confusing. So for any of you that maybe want to have questions or conversations about your official award notice, we're happy to talk to you individually. It's a little bit weird to kind of talk about it without you actually seeing it through your Wolverine Access account. The other thing to note as it relates to just students being packaged as a full-time student, sometimes for part-time students, that does mean that the refund that you received is actually incorrect based upon your enrollment. Sometimes students are awarded more of a financial aid refund than they should have been because of that full-time packaging. And so I always encourage students, if you are a part-time student in the program and you receive a refund, I encourage students to hold on to that refund and not spend it until you can verify with either our office or the university's Office of Financial Aid that the refund you received is appropriate based on your credit enrollment. We don't have it happen too often presently, but when we first initiated our part-time programs, every semester we would have a slew of part-time students that would reach out to us and say, hey, I'm a month into the program and the university is telling me that I owe them $3,000. And the problem is that you were refunded more money than you should have been, but then students took that refund and spent it by the time they were notified that the university essentially wanted their money back. And so students were kind of panicked as it relates to, what do I do now? I no longer have access to this money. So again, we don't find it happen as often. And one of the ways that the university's Office of Financial Aid tries to circumvent this is this situation usually happens for students that are accessing a Graduate Plus loan. And so one of the things that the university's Office of Financial Aid is doing is actually withholding posting of Grad Plus loans for students until students are able to confirm that their enrollment is finalized. And so you should be receiving an email within the next couple of weeks if you are planning to access a Graduate Plus loan in regards to the process for getting that loan posted to your account. So again, I think that their office has kind of, gotten slammed, honestly, with several concerns from students who were overpaid regarding a refund. And so this is their way of trying to rectify the situation. But just to be on the safe side, I always encourage students just to verify before you go out and spend any refund money. As I talked about, working while in the program, and Marissa did as well, many students in the full-time program do hold part-time jobs. We find that anywhere from 10 to 20 hours per week is usually the average for our students. And so whether that's your own personal part-time job, or if you're deciding to pursue work study, and maybe those of you that are not here local to campus, maybe you're able to identify a remote work study position. Again, working full-time and engaging in the program full-time is generally not feasible because of field placement and course conflicts. With work study, most of the jobs are going to be on campus, working with the university or perhaps even Michigan Medicine. However, there might be some off-campus opportunities available. So kind of programs that are affiliated with the University of Michigan to some extent and are eligible to be classified as a work study position, but it's not technically through the university. One of them that I am a little more familiar with is the America Reads program. So it's basically a tutoring program for local children in the area, kind of an after-school type programming. So again, it's not a University of Michigan or University of Michigan program, but it's a University of Michigan affiliated program. I do encourage students to begin exploring work study positions now and throughout your time in the program. We talked a little bit about accepting and or declining work study, and I just want to throw in a note here that you can decide to accept or decline your work study award. Maybe you're coming into the program and you're not sure if you're going to be able to have a work study position. Maybe you want to come in and get a better understanding of how classes go. You want to get a better understanding of the time requirements for field placement before you make that commitment to enter into a work study position. And so that's okay to accept the work study position in your, or accept the work study award rather, in your Wolverine Access account, and hold off on actually finding a job. Remember, as Marissa mentioned, work study is not a loan, so it's not anything that you ever have to pay back. It's one of those awards that either you use it or you lose it. So if you never find a work study position on campus, you just will never, for instance, see that $3,000 award in your bank account. Work study is available for full-time and part-time students. Students must be registered for at least 4 credits in a given semester in order to be eligible for work study. Some additional resources for students to explore. Specifically for students that are located in the state of Michigan, the university does offer a child care subsidy. So it's funding to help with dependent children child care. Again, unfortunately, this is only available for students that are in the state of Michigan, as you do have to provide documentation of your child being in child care through a licensed child care provider here in the state of Michigan. The university does also offer student health insurance. Typically, health insurance, again, as I mentioned, spring, summer semester is considered an island in and of itself. And so students are able to enroll in health insurance specifically for spring, summer semester, and we've included the deadlines here on the screen. There will be a separate enrollment period if you are interested in student health insurance for the fall and or winter semesters. And that information will probably come out probably early August is usually the time frame for that. Tuition insurance, this would be for students, maybe you are presenting with some type of chronic illness. Maybe there is some type of mental health scenario that you have going on. And so tuition insurance would be for students who might anticipate needing to withdraw at a certain point throughout the semester and not want to be on the hook for the tuition costs that come along with that. The university has various deadlines. And so, as I mentioned, 3 weeks into the semester, you're typically able to withdraw completely from the university without very much of a penalty outside of some withdrawal fees, but you wouldn't be responsible for, again, the full tuition and fees that are charged, whether you're a full-time or a part-time student. However, once we get past that 3rd week drop add deadline, the tuition refund kind of goes away, so to speak. There's a certain point in which you're still responsible for 50% of the tuition. And then there's a certain point where you're going to be responsible for all of tuition if you decide to withdraw from the program. But the tuition insurance is there to help students in the scenarios in which they think that there might be some extenuating circumstances, health or mental health wise, that may require them to disenroll at any point throughout the semester. The university does also offer a payment plan. And so what this does is it allows you to make payments out of pocket that are spread out over equal installments for the payment plan period. And I want to come back to that in just a moment. But it's important to note that the payment plan is not available to students, unfortunately, in the spring summer semester. The payment plan is only available in the fall and winter semester. And so if your plan is to pay any portion of your tuition and fees out of pocket, particularly for spring summer semester, you have to have all of that money and pay all of that money again by that April 30th deadline. There's not an option to split up those payments over the entirety of the semester.
Great.
Anyone have a question? Okay. But for fall and winter semester, oh, go ahead, Stephanie.
Yes, hi. So I do have a question. I know you mentioned that everything does need to be paid by the 30th.
Oh,
Let's say go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. So let's say for instance, if I do go ahead and I accept the work study and I am able to find a job, that remaining balance that I have, does that still need to be paid prior to as well? Or
It does, and thank you for asking that. And because as Marissa mentioned earlier on, work study is not anything that is applied to your tuition and fees. You actually have to work your job throughout the semester to receive a paycheck. So think about work study as if, you know, say you found a part-time job while you're in the program, I don't know, working at Applebee's. It's the same concept. You work however many hours for that 2-week pay period, and you receive a paycheck for those hours worked. And you receive that paycheck directly to your bank account or a check being mailed to your home. So that's why, as Marissa mentioned, work study, students are typically using work study to, you know, pay for living expenses. So utility bills, putting gas in your car, paying a cell phone bill. Those are just a few things that come to mind. Because again, you have to work that job throughout the entirety of the semester to ever receive that funding. And again, I suppose that you could take those biweekly checks that you get and pay them towards your tuition, particularly for fall and winter. But I would imagine that in most cases, your work study check is not going to be enough, typically, for your payment plan installments for the entirety of the semester. I guess a lot of that would depend upon how much your installments are. But remember, work study is usually only a max of $3,000 for the semester. And so on average, I probably would say that for any given pay period, most students aren't receiving more than about $200 to $300 every 2 weeks, if that. Again, it just depends upon the job that you have, how many hours you're working, and what's the hourly pay. Does that answer your question, Stephanie?
yes, it does. I'll probably have more questions towards the end that we could probably talk about together, but yes, I
Okay.
do. Thank you.
No worries at all. And so again, just getting back to the payment plan, as I mentioned, for fall and winter semester, students are able to sign up for the payment plan, and the payments are spread over 5 equal installments. I want to add in here that unlike what you all may be thinking, the payment plan doesn't run concurrently with the semester. So just for those of you that are not aware, our fall semester is usually September through December. Our winter semester is January through April. And then our spring summer, which for us, we have a combined spring summer semester, is usually May through August. And so most students tend to think, well, if the fall semester is September through December, my payments will be September through December. Unfortunately not. For the fall semester, the payment plan period actually runs from June to October. The winter semester payments actually run from November to March. So essentially, if you were to sign up for a payment plan for the fall sometime in August, you likely are going to have payments essentially already due for June and July and possibly August, depending upon when you sign up for that payment plan. So again, the payment plan for fall and winter does not run concurrently with the semester. Some additional scholarship and funding opportunities. As Marissa mentioned, we have some development fund awards through the School of Social Work, many of which were awarded around the time of admissions. And so we evaluate all students for many of these development fund awards at the time of admission, just through review of your application materials. There are a subset that will require a separate application, and these applications will usually become available to students sometime in August. And so you all will be current students at the time. And so we'll send out an email notification when those applications are available, giving you links to the actual application along with the deadlines. Most of those development fund awards that will require a separate application are typically one-time only awards. So it's not going to be anything that will be recurring for each semester that you're enrolled in the program. Most of these awards are one-time only. So, you know, if the application is available in the fall, decisions are made at some point in the fall, and the money is typically posted towards your fall student account. Because most of these development fund awards are awarded in the middle towards the end of the fall semester, most students obviously have already covered their tuition and fees towards the beginning. And so for a lot of students, these development fund awards end up being refundable awards for you to utilize, again, towards living expenses or other educational expenses that you might have. On the School of Social Work website, we do have a listing of external scholarships. So these are scholarships that do not have anything to do with the University of Michigan or the School of Social Work specifically, but just a listing, and not exhaustive, but it's a listing of external scholarships that our program has been made aware of that our students may be eligible to apply for. So if you have any questions as it relates to those external scholarships, you definitely want to reach out to the individual organizations and agencies that are offering those scholarships. The university does also offer graduate student instructor, graduate student research assistant, and graduate student staff assistant positions across campus. Unfortunately, we do not offer any of these positions in the School of Social Work, but our students are able to apply for and receive these positions in other departments across campus. Students must be registered for a minimum of 6 credits in a given semester, 5 credits with advisor approval. So that means that most of you, even as a part-time student, are eligible to apply for these. I'll note that, so as it kind of lists here, graduate student instructors are assisting in the planning and teaching of undergraduate courses. Graduate student research assistants are assisting faculty on various research projects. GSSAs are assisting with more administrative tasks within a department. And again, while I mentioned that we don't offer these positions in the School of Social Work, many of our students are interested in applying for these positions in other departments across campus. With GSI positions, we typically find that you have to have availability to be on campus to engage in these positions, mainly because most undergraduate courses are taught in person. And so again, because you're assisting in the teaching of an undergraduate course, you typically are required to be present for those undergraduate courses that you're assisting in teaching. GSRA and GSSA positions, there might be some remote opportunities available for those of you that are not local to campus. But the reason we mention them in the context of financial aid is because of the benefits that come along with them. Most of these positions are held on a semester by semester basis, and you usually are awarded a full tuition waiver, health insurance, and a monthly stipend in the semesters that you hold these positions. So again, they can be really good financial benefits for students who are looking to have everything covered, because as we mentioned earlier on, the School of Social Work does not typically cover full tuition or full cost of attendance with grants and scholarships from our program. If you were to go on the university's careers website today, you may not see any available positions, which is entirely okay. The departments that offer these positions decide when they post their available positions. And so we don't typically find that these opportunities are available during the spring, summer semester. But if you start searching on the website throughout the course of the summer, you might find some positions that are of interest to you for you to hold in the fall semester or potentially in the winter semester. So we always encourage students to continuously check this site for available opportunities. I didn't add in here, but just a quick tip. When you go to careers.umich.edu, there is a drop-down box that says career interests. If you select graduate students, that will filter out all of the GSI, GSSA, GSRA type positions. You won't have to go through all of the available positions that are open across the university. This kind of concludes our webinar, but I want to provide some contact information for both Marissa, myself, as well as the School of Social Work's financial aid office email address. And just a quick plug, Marissa and I, we spend a lot of our weeks not only processing financial aid for students, but just having conversations with students about making sure that there is an understanding of financial aid and what they're getting themselves into. And I don't mean that negatively, obviously, but I think that it's important for a lot of our students who this might be your first time engaging with financial aid. You know, maybe your parents did all of this for you at the undergraduate level, or maybe you had scholarships that covered majority of your costs, so you didn't have to worry about how federal aid is factored into all of this. And so we spend a lot of our time just engaging with students to make sure that they understand the financial aid process, how, and again, just a lot of what we talked about in this webinar, and breaking it down as best as we possibly can individually for each student. So that's where the financial aid counseling comes in. We are able to meet with students around budgeting and money management. So, you know, again, for a lot of students, this may be your first time having large sums of money deposited to you for living expenses. And so if you're concerned that you might not be spending the money appropriately, or if you're concerned about, you know, how much should I allot towards my rent costs versus utilities versus books and supplies, we can help you get a better grasp on that. Throughout the academic year, we also do webinars on student loan repayment and student loan forgiveness options. We're able to talk to students, obviously, at any point during their time in the program, but we do have dedicated webinars each semester to highlight this for students. We usually encourage students in the semester that you're graduating to tap into some of those webinars, just so that the information is a bit more fresh on your mind as you exit the program. But these are conversations, again, I would imagine we might be engaging in a lot more of these, you know, over the next few months, just kind of given what comes down at the federal level. I know many of you have heard about, you know, the possibility of the Department of Education going away. And so there's talks about student loans and kind of that whole process being shifted to a different office within the federal government. And so what that may look like for you individually, connecting with loan servicers in the future may be impacted by some of these decisions. And so I want you to know that we're trying to stay on top of what's coming down the pipeline to the best of our ability. But please know that you do not have to walk through this process on your own. Marissa and I are always here to answer any questions that you may have. Also, just last but not least, some contact information for the university's Office of Financial Aid, along with Student Financial Services. I don't know that we talked about this in grave detail, but Student Financial Services actually handles student accounts and billing. So if you have questions, for instance, about your bill and, you know, whether or not you were charged as a non-resident versus a resident, or just specifics about refund amounts, you're always welcome to communicate with Student Financial Services. And even though Marissa mentioned that distinctly, our office typically only handles School of Social Work funding. We encourage a lot of students to start with our office as the first point of contact for any financial aid related questions. Many of us in the office, not just Marissa and myself, are knowledgeable about the general financial aid processes. And sometimes students have just reported that they've had a better experience communicating with us directly, as opposed to, waiting on hold for a financial aid counselor that a lot of times doesn't have very much knowledge as it relates to all of the other funding outside of the federal loans and work study, as many of our students are looking to explore those free resources, as you will. So thinking about scholarships and grants. So you're always welcome to start with us. And if we need to refer you to another office to get your questions answered, we'd be happy to do that as well. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And as mentioned, we'll stay on for questions. If any of you, want to unmute yourselves, excuse me, and ask questions of the group, maybe you have a question that someone else has. Otherwise, kind of towards the end, if there are more kind of personal questions that you want to ask, still, if it's a larger format, we can certainly work with you to connect with us in scheduling an appointment to talk about those specific matters. So again, I want to thank you all, and hopefully you got some very valuable information this evening regarding financial aid.
Hi, so I had a quick question. So you said all of our aid will be applied to our bill around April 25th, and then our bills due April 30th. Does somebody contact us to tell us what we owe?
You won't be contacted necessarily, but that invoice, you'll receive an email anytime that an invoice or some activity goes on within your student account. So I would just encourage you to check your email. That email with your invoice should identify what your balance will be. Again, it's just important to make sure that you're looking at that invoice to identify that all of the aid that you were promised essentially is going to be posted or has posted.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I do have a question in regards to that as well. So with that being the case, it is being posted all of our aid by the 25th, will that give us enough time if we need to go back and accept more financial aid?
It does. And remember that I mentioned, so the university typically does offer a small grace periods, and it's a little difficult to answer because while they used to offer a 30-day grace period, I identified, I don't know, this was maybe about a year or so ago, that's not the case anymore. Grace periods are based upon when your financial aid is processed through the university's Office of Financial Aid. So depending upon the timing of when you submitted, for instance, your entrance counseling or that promissory note, that determines how much time after April the 30th you have to actually make a payment. So with that being said, if payments are typically made after April 30th in general terms, a $30 late fee is assessed. And that is assessed every 30 days that your balance remains unpaid. So with that being said, students do have a little bit of a time period to make sure that they have all of their aid in order. So if you need to maybe borrow more money or accept more of your loans, you definitely have some time to do that. And one other thing that I didn't share, but for those of you that are still joining us, student financial services, again, they are the ones that assess the late fee to students. However, their office does offer a one-time late fee waiver. So if you happen to get a late fee, and you're just concerned about that $30, you can always contact their office to request that $30 be waived. But this is also why it's so important to make sure that you're trying to identify that your aid that you've been awarded or that you've accepted is enough to cover your costs. So that's always why I encourage students to reach out to Marissa or myself before tuition and fees are due, well before tuition and fees are due, to make sure that you've done everything that you need to do. And so in your case, for most of you, like I said, you're going to be registering on April the 11th. And so shortly after you register for classes, if you want to reach out to us and have a conversation about your financial aid package and what your actual costs will be, I encourage you to reach out to us at that time, because we can share with you, well, based upon what I see in the system, it looks like you're going to need more money to cover your costs, or you're not going to need as much money as you actually accept it. So I always encourage students, usually around the time of registration, to have conversations about their financial aid, so you don't find yourself in a jam when tuition and fees are due, saying, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was going to have a balance, and so how do I figure this out?
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Any additional questions, or anybody that perhaps would like to schedule some time to speak with us?
I definitely know I would like to schedule some time,
Okay.
probably after I register on the 11th. I know I've talked to Marissa before in the past, but I just, now that I'm getting back into school, I want to make sure that I have everything correct. So, um, should I just email you a good time that works? Or can we schedule something now?
Go ahead, Marissa.
Yeah, either works, whatever works best for you. I'm usually available Monday through Fridays, about 9 to 4:30 p.m., with a few exceptions. So if you have something that works, I can check my calendar now, or if you just wanted to shoot me an email with some availability, I'm happy to get that scheduled for us.
We can do, so if I have class on the 11th, can we either do like the 16th or the 15th if you have anything available?
Oh, 15th or 16th, yeah, either day works for me. Any specific time frame?
Yeah, I'm starting to pull up my work calendar now just to make sure I'm not scheduling multiple meetings. Um, okay, I have an open availability on the 15th, and you say you start at 9 a.m.? Did I make that up?
Yeah, I start in the office at 8:30, but yeah, I usually schedule appointments around 9 a.m.
But we can do 9 a.m. on Tuesday the 15th. That would be perfect for me.
Okay, and would you like to meet in person, over Zoom, or over the phone?
I really wish I could be in person, but I'm all the way here in Texas. So,
Oh, not gonna
so
work for
Zoom is fine.
Okay, I'll go ahead and set up a Zoom meeting for us, and I'll send you a Google Calendar invite with the link for the Zoom meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, Marissa.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to meeting with you.
Yes, well, you ladies have been fabulous. I learned a lot today. I feel a little bit more confident in going into the newest semester for school. So thank you all. Thank you both.
Yeah, it is our pleasure. And hopefully we get to meet you at some point in person. I know for a lot of online students, particularly that are not in Michigan, graduation tends to be it. So hopefully you can make it up, once you're finished with the program. But definitely know we're here throughout your entire time.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully I'll be back home sooner than later because I'm from Michigan, born and raised out there, and I have family that's all out there. So hopefully I'll get to come
Awesome.
on campus and see you all sooner than the 2 years when I graduate.
Awesome. Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Yes. Well, you ladies have a great day. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Go ahead and stop recording.
Well, that's okay.